Fifth generation aircraft. It's a term that you often hear thrown around on the internet and the media and even the aircraft manufacturers themselves. But what is a fifth generation aircraft? Now, I first asked this question when I was reading an article on the PAK FA, and it claimed that the PAK FA wasn't a fifth generation fighter. The PAK FA, of course, being the joint Indian-Russian program for a fifth generation fighter. And apparently it wasn't a fifth generation fighter because it possessed the same technology found in the Su-35, and it didn't have fused data linking, and its engines weren't up to the fifth generation standard. Now, normally I'd let such rubbish or propaganda pass over my head, but it's becoming increasingly common, and more importantly, it's filling people's heads with this propaganda that paints a picture of a fifth generation aircraft that is actually quite inaccurate. To address the article, firstly I'd like to point out that the PAK FA is in fact a prototype, for those media journalists or whatever out there that don't actually know. It's not as fully fledged, of course, as the F-35 or F-22, so it's a bit of a no-brainer to say that perhaps the data linking technology might not be included on the prototype. Personally, for me, it wouldn't be on the list. In fact, from a financial standpoint, it would be sensible to include it in a later production variant in order to spread the costs more effectively instead of blowing it all in one go and wondering why the project is so expensive. But that's just me. Moving on, the article also failed to mention that the Su-35 is listed as a 4++ generation fighter due to the fact that it incorporates 5th generation electronics, and as for the engines, the PAK FA is set to obtain 5th generation engines once they're available, although the last time I checked they were still under development and in the testing phase. So, that brings us back to the question, what is a 5th generation fighter? Now, in order to define a 5th generation fighter, we're going to have to go back and take a look at the previous generations. Now, according to the Aviationist, Generation 1 was jet propulsion. Generation 2 was swept wings, range-only radar, infrared missiles. Generation 3 was supersonic speed, pulse radar, able to shoot down targets beyond visual range. Generation 4 was pulse Doppler radar, high maneuverability, and look-down, shoot-down missiles. Generation 4 Plus is high agility, sensor fusion, reduced signatures, as in radar signatures, I presume. And Generation 4 Plus is active electronically scanned array radars, continued reduced signatures, or some active waveform cancelling stealth, and in some cases even supercruise. Now, a bit of background on where the 5th generation term first came up. This was back when the US created the ATF program, or the Advanced Tactical Fighter program. Now, this gave birth to 2 aircraft, technically 3, but one of them was another variation of the other. The first aircraft that came out of the ATF program, and this is often a thing that people seem to think that the F-22 is the first 5th generation aircraft, or the first aircraft from the ATF program, but it wasn't. The YF-23 was, and the YF-22 was next. The YF-22, of course, being the prototype for the F-22 that we know today. Now, the ATF program was created in order to combat the issue of Russian warplanes being having competitive specifications, if you like, to their Western counterparts. So, when the F-22 rolled out, of course, they had to list it as a different generation because it incorporated a load of new technology that was never seen before on a fighter. One of those being full aspect stealth, internal weapons, extreme agility, sensor fusion, integrated avionics, and supercruise. Now, compared to what the media seems to think is the definition of a 5th generation aircraft, it's slightly different. For some reason, they've based some of their views on what a 5th generation plane should be on the F-35, which is the inclusion of full advanced data linking. Now, sensor fusion, and full data linking they're similar, but they are slightly different. Sensor fusion is a form of data linking, but it is from what I've gathered, is by no means exactly the same. So from the media's perspective, it's stealth, internal weapons, extreme agility, full data linking, integrated avionics, and supercruise. The only problem with that is that it debunks, or rather dethrones, 2 fifth-generation planes. Those being the F-35 and the F-22. The F-22 doesn't have, as far as I'm aware, fully fledged data linking. It has full sensor fusion, but like I mentioned before, sensor fusion and data fusion are different, although they're kind of the same. It's hard to explain. But the F-35 is also dethroned from its 5th generation status because it doesn't have full supercruise. It has limited supercruise. I think it's limited to about 150 miles, as some reports say. But with that said, it's basically saying that the F-35 isn't a 5th generation aircraft. And this is the media that's saying that the PAK FA isn't worthy of a 5th generation status because it doesn't have data fusion, or it doesn't have special engines that allow it to properly supercruise. It seems rather contradictory to me, but even Lockheed Martin has actually had to change their definition of 5th generation. And I quote, their definition is, quote, combining advanced stealth, fighter speed and agility, fully fused sensor information, network-enabled operations, and advanced sustainment into the world-class air superiority machine, unquote. So, with that in mind, what can we define as a 5th generation aircraft, or what do we define as a 5th generation aircraft? Now, there is no set in stone definition. Like I said, the media seems to think that its definition of a 5th generation fighter isn't actually including any 5th generation planes at all, which seems a bit bizarre. But also, the definition seems to have changed throughout the years. Like I say, Lockheed Martin has actually had to change their definition of a 5th generation aircraft with the introduction of the F-35, because its engine, the F-135, wasn't designed to supercruise. So, with that in mind, it brings us back to the question that we asked at the very start of the video, and I've asked numerous times throughout this video, what is 5th generation aircraft? And the answer is, it's a buzzword. In all seriousness, it's nothing, to me, it's nothing but fancy stealth and fancy electronics. Those are literally the only 2 added specifications on top of 4++, and you get the idea, on top of all the rest. Those are the only 2 things that 5th generation really brings to the table. It seems, at least to the media, that it's more of a buzzword than something that can actually be defined. The other thing is that the performance of such aircraft, of 5th generation aircraft, is something that's actually pointless to discuss, because they're covered by some form of Official Secrets Act, and that's something I'll go into for perhaps another video or something. But hopefully that answers the question what 5th generation aircraft is. Stealth and electronics. Nothing more, nothing less.